Welcome to the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This podcast is dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like all the best bookshops, this podcast is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. So tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book at the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. I'm Stacey Horan, author, book lover, and host of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This is episode number 220. For more information about this or any of our episodes, go to my website, staceyhoran.com. If you enjoy the podcast, leave us a review, like us on social media, and share us with your friends, family, and fellow readers. In today's episode of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet, I'm chatting with author Becky Dean about her new young adult contemporary romantic comedy, Hearts Overboard. Set on a cruise ship bound for Alaska, this novel follows Savannah Moore, who is still reeling from a public breakup with her boyfriend and being nicknamed Moore the Bore. In an effort to heal her heart and her reputation, Savannah vows to do one new thing each day. Stepping out of her comfort zone is far from easy, and it's made all the more challenging since her longtime nemesis, Tanner Woods, is also on the ship. Because his parents and hers are friends, Savannah and Tanner are forced to spend time together. As it turns out, she may not dislike him as much as she thought. If you like Hearts Overboard, check out Becky's other young adult romantic comedies, Picture Perfect Boyfriend, and Love and Other Great Expectations. Becky loves to travel, so her books are set in places she has been, locations she thought readers might enjoy going to as well. In this episode, I'll chat with Becky about her writing journey, her travel addiction, and why no matter what she writes, she has to love the setting, as well as a few other things coming up. Becky Dean, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I thought what we could do today is start by talking about your newest book, Hearts Overboard. It's a young adult contemporary romance. And if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about this book and what inspired you to write it.
Yes. So it is a young adult, probably romantic comedy would be a good phrase, set on an Alaskan cruise. And it's about a girl named Savannah Moore who gets broken up with very publicly in an embarrassing way and earns the nickname Moore the Bore when her ex implies that she is stuck in her ways and a bit on the boring side. So she decides to use her family's company cruise to Alaska to prove she can be fun and interesting and do all kinds of new things and hopefully earn her ex back and get rid of that embarrassing nickname. And she finds a little bit of unexpected help from her longtime nemesis, who his parents are friends with hers, and he is also on the cruise. And so they have known each other their whole lives and do not really get along that well. And so she finds herself kind of teamed up with him, forced proximity on this cruise ship for a couple of weeks, and finds maybe she doesn't dislike him quite so much after all.
Excellent. Okay. So there are a couple things I want to talk about with regards to this book and some of your others. So it sounds like this could have been a book written for adults, or maybe even say the new adult audience. Why young adult? Why decide to set the characters in that age and write for that audience?
Yeah, I've just always, since I started writing, it just naturally came out writing for teens. I love the voice and the tone of YA books. I love the themes you can explore on this trip. Tanner and Savannah both help each other sort of discover who they want to be in life. And that's, a recurring theme in YA. And so I really like that as they explore the world and learn more about themselves, it's deciding how they fit into that world and who they want to be in life. The inspiration for this, so I think I forgot to mention that Savannah decides to try one new thing a day as sort of her plan for this. And I kind of did that a few years ago, just in my hometown, trying one new thing a month, just kind of to get out of the rut. And that's sort of Savannah is needing to shake things up a little bit. And so I feel like writing for teens just sort of lets you explore those themes of who you want to be and the uplifting messages of not staying in in your box and living life kind of all in is the theme of this book, I guess. And I really love my books are all very PG rated. And so I think that that's becoming more and more rare in the YA market, which, it's great that there are all sorts of books out there. But I hear from lots of parents of younger readers, younger teen readers who appreciate that. And so I like writing books that lots of parents, feel are safe for their kids.
Yeah, that's an interesting trend because generally in the romance genre, books appear on a scale, let's say, from, sweet and wholesome on one end to, well, about as wild as you could imagine on the other,
Spicy.
to put it nicely. So your books fall obviously on the sweeter end of things.
Yes, very. I think that they like to use the word spice levels now. And so mine are very low spice, a little bit of kissing, and that's all you're going to find. And
So are these the kinds of books you gravitate to generally when you're reading, or you gravitated to when you were the age of the readers you're writing for?
oh gosh, by the time I was the age of the readers I'm writing for, I had pretty much read young adult wasn't quite as big of a genre back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was reading adult books by then just because there weren't really that many books for younger people and I had already read them all by then. But yeah, I guess it's just sort of the thing that I hope my daughter will find one day or that a lot of my friends' kids love them. And so that's really encouraging to hear. It's just kind of I read a little bit of everything. So I'll read everything from this kind of book to some of the darker stuff. But when I write, I really love to just be in that sort of safe, cozy space. So I think my reads or my books are always going to be safe reads where you can just kind of have a good time for a few hours. It's not going to be too deep or too heavy. Maybe touch on some issues, but more in a lighthearted way that kind of just leaves you feeling warm inside.
Well, you mentioned that sort of the theme of this book is figuring out who you are and the idea of living life all in. Part of that occurs with the idea of travel. So, this Alaskan
Mhm.
cruise, taking your characters out of their normal everyday environment and putting them in an environment that's completely foreign and unexpected with all the fun twists and turns and challenges that presents. This idea
Yes.
of adventure changing who we are, whether we wanted that adventure or not, the idea that it changes us. Why do you find yourself drawn to that? Why kind of latch onto that as a theme for your books?
Yeah, I love to travel. So I've been lots and lots of places and kind of an addiction actually. But I just love seeing new places, whether it's the nature like in Alaska, which is just an amazingly beautiful place, to seeing new cultures, to trying new foods and places totally different from where I live. And I love it so much that when I write books, the setting is just sort of something that always is very important to me to make sure it feels like you're immersed in that and you're really there and the book takes you on a trip, maybe from the comfort of your couch. But yeah, like you said, I really do think that travel also it opens your eyes to new things. I remember when I was a teenager, the first time I left the country, just seeing how different things were other places. And even still now, just the reminder that the world is so big and there's so much out there, but also people are people everywhere. And then just the way it makes you look at your own life and yourself and the way it stretches, definitely in this one for Savannah, stretches you out of your comfort zone. Travel, there's always so many things that can go wrong, and it's you finding out how you handle them or being put into new situations. Or in my books, I really like to try to sort of pair the main character with the setting in a way that it's not just somebody's perfect vacation where they're looking forward to every aspect of it and it's easy for them. I like to make so in this one, I loved Alaska. I love outdoor adventure. I love seeing all of that. But Savannah's not that kind of person on purpose. So when she goes to Alaska, it's not a, oh yay, look at all the nature. It's beautiful here. It's, oh, there's wild animals and there's no buildings and there's nothing out here and this is kind of scary. And so I like to do that on purpose because I do think that try that aspect of travel really can help you see yourself better, see the world in a different way. And it's just a lot of fun also. Then I get to take extra trips through my books too. So
Right. And that's a really interesting twist, I think, on how a writer develops her characters. Talking to a lot of writers, characters are often based on themselves or people they know, or they're crafted to fit the plot line. They need a character that does these certain things in order to advance the plot, the mystery, or the whatever is happening in the book. But to develop your characters based on the setting and what the setting presents in the story, it's an interesting way to do that. How does that come about in your mind? I'm going to guess the setting comes first before, say, characters or plot for you.
In this one, it did, yeah. So this is my third travel rom-com is kind of what I call them. And I have a fourth coming out next year. And really for all of these, I guess no, they all kind of came like the location and the premise is kind of where I started and then built the characters from there. So I kind of have done something similar for, I think, all four of them, which I also write science fiction, and that I do very differently than these. But yeah, and because they are the travel rom-coms after my first one came out, and my editor wanted more of that type of thing. And it was really, I did pick the setting and sort of the general trope. So for this one, I started with Alaskan cruise and the rivals to lovers aspect, and then just kind of went from there.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about the other two books that you have out. One, Picture Perfect Boyfriend, and the other, Love and Other Great Expectations. In both of these, you've got sort of a similar scenario, right? Travel to another place, complications that arise therefrom, and a bit of crazy romantic comedy thrown in. So
Yep.
when you were thinking of these stories and you came up with the setting and the specific trope or storyline you wanted to explore, how did you decide on these locations in particular? Were they places that you had visited? Do you have a list of every place you visited and now you want to write a story about it? Or is it a case of the desire to travel there means that's the story that you're going to write, and then ultimately you'll get there?
Yeah, I
Which
haven't
comes
gotten to do
first?
that yet. That's the goal, is find a place I want to be, that I want to go, that I haven't been yet, and just get to write it off on my taxes to write a book set there. No, but so the first one is set in England, and that one, really the premise came to me first. It's a girl who's on a literary themed scavenger hunt, and so she solves clues that take her to locations of classic novels throughout Great Britain. And that idea, that was actually the first contemporary book I wrote. So I wrote four YA sort of science fiction fantasy books before that that have all since been shelved and will never see the light of day. And after those, I thought I would try a contemporary romance because I liked reading them. But because I like the fantasy genre so much, I really liked the quest. And so I was trying to find some sort of road trip, quest, mission, more than just, people in their hometown. And since I love to travel, I thought, oh, let's make, some kind of road trip. I was originally going to set it in America until I realized I much prefer British literature to American literature. So we shifted it to England. And yeah, that one I did actually, while I was writing it, was in England for something else and got to spend a couple days doing a little bit of research. And then really just though picked England because I love the books. And so the literary themed scavenger hunt, British literature was I had a lot of fun researching, rereading lots of the books that I love. And really, I did with that one, with the character, what I did in Hearts Overboard also was as a reader of British literature, thought that a trip like this sounded amazing, but then it's too easy. So I made the main character is an athlete who isn't into books, and she actually didn't even read half of the books she was supposed to read in her high school English class. So it makes the scavenger hunt more of a challenge for her. But that one was really fun. Just, I love England and getting to go all over the place and talk about all those books that I love. And then the second one, Picture Perfect Boyfriend, my editor wanted a second travel rom-com, and I wrote that during COVID. And so I wasn't able to go travel anywhere. So I actually did kind of what you mentioned. I made a list of all of the places I had been, enough to write about. So not just that I had been, but somewhere where I really felt I could capture the feel of the place without going back, since I wasn't able to travel. And I've been to Maui several times. And so that was one that I really felt I could do justice to without going to again. But I do sort of just have a list, not necessarily of everywhere I've been, but the places I think readers would enjoy going. So that was kind of the Alaskan cruise. How I picked that for my third setting was I looked at that list of places I could write about, but then I also did research on to sort of people's top bucket list vacation destinations. And so many people would love to go to Alaska and on an Alaskan cruise that I thought it would be fun to take readers there. So
Yeah. And you mentioned that there's a fourth one that will be coming out. Can
Yeah.
you give us any sneak
A
peeks
little.
of
Yeah,
that
we haven't
one?
released the blurb yet, but it'll come out next summer. It's called Love Unmasked,
Mm.
and it is set in Venice, which was somewhere I had been years ago and just loved the city and thought that that would be a really great romantic city to set a book in. And that is the first one I've actually done an official research trip for. So last summer while I was writing it, my husband and I went and spent a few days there, which was amazing. So
Very nice.
there is sort of the hidden identity theme, which you can get from the title with the Love Unmasked. They have masks, and that's all I can say for
Well, that's enough, I think, to pique anyone's interest. So
now.
excellent. So I think maybe it sounds like you've kind of found your voice, perhaps. Do you find that writing these? Do you find that this writing these kinds of stories, this romantic comedy, travel, figuring out who you are, that kind of thing? I mean, is that a happy place for you? Do you think this is where you will continue on in your journey?
Yeah, I hope so. So, like I mentioned earlier, I also write the science fiction, and I also really love writing sort of action scenes. So, I'm actually toying with maybe some ideas. We'll see if it goes anywhere of sort of the travel rom-com, but maybe with some other element thrown in, the sort of the action romance kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly just whatever I write. I liked the settings, and I liked the banter between characters, and I like to write romance. So, you'll probably find that in all of my books going forward, no matter what, kind of lighthearted romance but with some cool places and maybe a little bit of action involved.
Well, let's talk about the science fiction writing a bit because I'd like to talk about the stories you wrote and what was appealing about writing in that genre. What do you find there that you don't necessarily find in, say, the romantic comedy books?
Yeah, so in Hearts Overboard, actually, Savannah is a huge fan of science fiction TV shows. And you mentioned, some writers putting themselves into their main characters. And I do that probably less with the personality than I do for interests. So I try to give my characters interests that I already know a decent amount about. That way it's less research. So the first book she's a soccer player and I played soccer, and the second one she's into nature photography and that's what my husband does. And so Savannah loves science fiction TV shows and Hearts Overboard. And so that was super easy to write about because I grew up loving Star Trek, Star Wars, science fiction in general, reading science fiction books. And so, like I mentioned, the first four books I wrote, which are in a drawer, metaphorically never to be seen, but they were all some version of fantasy science fiction. And I just love the epic, kind of the quest feel, the wonder, especially for me, the science fiction, the wonder of the universe and thinking about what might be out there, and then just getting to write all the fun action scenes. So my series is very space opera, Star Wars type thing, a little bit of Mission Impossible, spies and pirates, and it's just really fun to, I don't know. That's what I get, I guess, from that I don't find in the contemporaries as much as getting to blow stuff up and have space battles and have chase scenes and have cool other planets, which are sort of maybe loosely based on places here on Earth that I visited, but then you can take them over the top because it's an alien planet kind of thing. And just the wonder of kind of exploring a whole galaxy of what might be out there. The
Yeah.
imagination, I guess. It's kind
Yeah.
of a mix. The travel romances are easy to research in the fact that they're set here in real places, so I can go and just write about it. But then you have to be very careful to be accurate as well. But the science fiction is just totally in my mind, so I can make up whatever I want to make up and um,
Right.
basically do whatever I want because it's all all in my head.
Right. Right. Yeah, there's something appealing about that world building and having control over everything that you create in the story.
Yeah, it can be stressful because you have to come up with everything, like you said. But I've read good advice about the science fiction and fantasy in general is not trying to make everything new and different because readers can only handle so much. If you had a sci-fi sounding phrase for every single thing in the book, they'd start to get confused. So it's picking a few things to focus on. So in my galaxy, they travel through colorful wormholes that are very dangerous, but the colors all kind of have different effects on spaceships and so that's kind of like a color theory in the wormholes.
Hmm.
And that's really, other than the cool planets I made up, everything else is fairly standard sci-fi. You'll find space pirates, you'll find smugglers, you'll find you know colonies fighting empires, that sort of thing. So you don't have to fully make up everything, but then you say, oh, what do I call this thing in the future, or how will communication work in this galaxy? And it can be kind of a lot of pressure to make sure it's logical.
I often ask if authors have a favorite character in any of the books that they've written,
Mm.
either one that they really liked because they just liked the character or one they love to hate. So I think it sounds like probably for you, setting is the character you like most, right? The one that plays the biggest role in the book. But aside from setting as a character, do you have other characters you've written that you've really liked? And I understand if it's hard to pick one, but I'm curious and why the character?
Yeah, it is hard to pick. There's so many. And it's funny that my mind gravitates toward some of the heroes rather than the main character heroines, whom I all love. But I really love Luke from Love and Other Great Expectations. He's a British boy and he loves books. He wants to teach English and be an English professor, so he's a big nerd, and I just love that. And then my science fiction series, so it's a four-book series, and each book focuses on two new main characters, but the previous characters also appear in other books. And in the first book, the characters meet a space pirate. His name is Digger, and he's only in maybe two or three chapters, but he was so much fun that when it came time to write the second book, I was like, he has to be the main character in book two because he was so fun to write. So I love Digger the space pirate. He's over the top. He's fun because he's purposely over the top. He knows he is, but he's trying to be like that kind of Jack Sparrow type
Right,
character. So it was a lot of fun to write, knowing it was being ridiculous, but he knows he's ridiculous too. So
right. Is this something you've always wanted to do? Is writing books like this? Is this something you aspired to when you were young, or is it something you found later in life?
yeah, when they ask you, in elementary school what you want to be when you grow up, I started saying author in second grade. So I wrote lots of stories as a kid, and then kind of got away from it high school, college. You get busy. And then a few years after college is when I really decided to pick it up and try to get published and write, seriously with the goal of publication. But I've wanted to do it pretty much my whole life.
Is it is this journey what you expected it to be?
No, definitely not. I had a very, very long journey. I know they say, on average, for traditional publishing, which was the route that I wanted to go personally, it takes usually authors several books and several years to get that first literary agent to get a contract. Usually the first book you write isn't, going to get you anywhere. And I was young and prideful and thought, oh yeah, I'll totally beat those odds. And I did not, which was fine. And it's been a great journey. I'm very thankful. But it was definitely a long one. I had several books shelved and then had an agent and parted ways with that agent and signed a new agent. And we actually had four books on sub with editors at one point. And I think it was about 2 years, and we just weren't getting takers on any of those four books. And then it was 2020. I remember because the world was a mess, but my writing career was finally going well. We had two offers on two different books within 2 weeks of each other. So it was after all of these years of writing a dozen books and not feeling like I was making progress, just everything happened very, very quickly.
Right. When it rains, it pours, they say.
Yes, it was a big blessing and not expected, but very grateful.
Do you have other goals for yourself now? I mean, other than, say, making sure book four makes its way out there in the world, do you have other goals? Are there other works in progress? Are there other things you want to do as a writer?
Yeah, really for me, it's just a goal to be able to keep publishing, right? Is because it's never guaranteed. So I'm very grateful. My publisher for the travel romances has wanted four total. We're hoping to maybe do more. So that one's finished and the fourth one's ready for next summer. My agent still has two completed science fiction novels that I've written that are separate from my series that we're hoping to find homes for, and one more kind of rom-com with a twist that she's also looking for a place for. And I've actually been taking a few months off. I had a baby earlier this year, and it's been kind of a nice break just to do some marketing and take a rest, but probably this fall start something new and not really sure what that looks like yet. But I don't know that I have a specific, I mean, obviously you have the hopes, right? Like my books we've sold four foreign translation rights, which has been amazing. That was one of my hopes slash dreams. Obviously would love to be able to just keep writing
Yeah.
and keep publishing. So,
Well, and that may be the first time I've ever heard anyone say, I had a baby earlier this year and I took a rest.
well, from the writing, yeah,
I was
it
going to say
was,
the rest is
I
probably
took
the
the rest
last
from,
thing
I
you're
took the
getting.
rest from the writing because I intended to keep writing when I had the baby after she was born, and that went out the window. So I've been trying to give myself grace and not push myself to jump back into the writing until I feel a little bit better about that. Because yeah,
Right, right.
not
But
not not resting from the baby, just
yeah.
After really writing for about 15 years without really taking breaks, like I would finish one book and just go immediately start another one. So
So this is a nice break
it's probably the
in that
longest I've
regard.
been without working on a novel in quite a while, other than just,
Wow.
the copy edits and stuff. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, if people want to learn more about you and your books and look out for new releases, that sort of thing, where's the best place to go to find you and that kind of information?
yeah, I'm mostly for social media on Instagram, Becky Dean Writes. I post about both of my genres, so you'll find me as Becky/BL Dean because I write science fiction under my initials. And I kind of do a little bit of both on Instagram, and actually kind of will be letting my sci-fi alter ego take over in September and do some more sci-fi talk, but then back to the regularly scheduled mix after that. And I've been getting into Substack lately for my newsletter. So like I'll send all of the updates, links to media, interviews, things like that on my newsletter, which you can find in my bio on Instagram. And those are kind of the two main places that I am now.
And if people want to purchase a copy of Hearts Overboard or any of the other books you have out, where's the best place to go to buy them?
Yeah, the travel rom-coms are available everywhere widely. And then my local independent bookstore, Book People in Austin, Texas, is actually really fantastic. And they have a pretty new signed copies program. So if you want signed copies, you can go to Book People and they have those. The science fiction, my publisher is a smaller press, and so they do Amazon exclusively. So everything there is on Amazon. There's Kindle, Kindle Unlimited, audiobook, and paperback. And the audiobook actually just won a Realm Award for my first science fiction book. So award-winning science
Wow.
fiction.
Very nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, it was a huge surprise, but very excited.
Yeah. Well, Becky, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast. And I want to wish you luck with Hearts Overboard. And we'll look forward to the new one coming out next summer. So, congratulations on everything you've accomplished so far. Best of luck with the rest of your writing journey.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
The Bookshop at the End of the Internet is a podcast dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like any good bookshop, this podcast features a wide variety of books by the equally varied and interesting authors who felt compelled to write them. This podcast gives you a chance to meet these wonderful writers and discover your next must-read book. Listen to the authors describe their books and tell you their stories in their own words. My interviews feature books from all genres and authors from all walks of life, including those who are indie published as well as those published by small presses and large publishing houses. Looking for unique, not so easy to find books for yourself, a friend, or a book club? Tune into this podcast and find your newest favorite author or maybe a soon-to-be bestseller. This podcast, like all the best bookshops, is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. Tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book. You never know what treasures you might find in the Bookshop at the End of the Internet.